Hello viewers and welcome to another episode of Trashtalk on Flying Circus, where I talk about the planes in the book. In this episode, let's talk about the rest of the Believers planes. As I have already talked about the goddamn blender, you can check it at the following link instead. So, Believers planes are just like their pilots, they are completely insane. Let's start this episode off with the Theler Zweihander, which is, well, when Gotha Empire reached its 300th anniversary, it celebrated with an unusual sight of close air formation above the Kaisergrab with high-performance planes of the era. This was the start of a long and proud Gotha tradition of close stunt flying to celebrate the power and skill of the Empire's airmen. To celebrate the victory over Macchi, the stunt teams were issued the Theler Star, a machine designed not for combat, but as stable platform for careful formations, so of course it was put into battle when the final war with Fokker broke out, and when I mean final, I mean final. These Theler Star were redesigned as emergency bomber interceptor, by using their blade to cut apart incoming aircrafts. This duty was considered by pilot as
Was ist denn das für Scheiße?
And increasingly few pilots were willing to risk it because anyone that thought this plane wasn't a mistake usually fucking died. Large amount of these planes survived the war, as the pilots would simply fly away into rural area when cities they were sent to defend were already lost. Only the most foolhardy pilot would try to use these machines in their intended role, and guess who you are? On the surface, the Theler Zweihander is definitely quite a high-performance plane. It has high speed, high handling, good stability, and high durability, though it leaks energy on a turn. However, it only has a single light machine gun for firepower, and, well, the wing blade which can deal 1d20 damage per speed factor, which is second digit of your speed, while your plane only take 1d10 damage, if successful. That sounds like an amazing amount of damage, but it's also very risky because you could very easily just crash into the enemy plane since you need 16 plus on dogfight for it to even succeed. So basically, high risk, high reward, and extremely stupid. If you use it at speed just below the overspeed, the Theler Zweihander can deal 2d20 damage with its wing blade, but if you decided to just go fuck it and go past your overspeed, you can potentially do 3d20 with 30 speed if you want your plane to be intact, or even further beyond that if you just want something to die. Luckily, thanks to low radiator, the engine ends up having rather high reliability, so you don't need to worry about wearing out the engine quickly unless you are very unlucky. However, as if it's not bad enough, this thing doesn't have wheels, it instead has landing skid, which makes all of your landing a crash landing. Even when it's a controlled landing, you only take -1 result. It's also one of the only two planes in the airplane catalog with -2 in escape, the other being the Jernsbach experiment. And since both go down and bail out moves use comm to get better result, your pilot seriously need high comm to fly this thing, or it's just gonna be an expensive coffin. As for the variants, this plane has none, but considering most surviving examples of it are used by runaway pilots, you could probably argue with your game master that some of them have modified their plane to be safer, like using it as an energy fighter, or maybe it got even worse. And one last thing, the Theler Zweihander is thankfully not real, but I can't say the same for the next example, the Arntwerke D.13, a fighter bomber that can carry 3 people into the ground. The Arntwerke D.13 was a design any other company would call a failure. Built with only components from the C.5 series of observers, the aircraft was intended to act as a heavy fighter with 2 gun positions that could fire uninterrupted by propellers. The problem, however, comes from the fact that it used wing warping and 2 independent tails for rolling, which resulted in very divergent flight characteristics, but Arntwerke was already tooled to make the D.13 and orders for thousands had been made. It was found that if the aircraft was handled with sufficient care it made a decent strafer, and was agile enough to tangle with interceptors, but by that point most had been dispersed to sectarian paramilitaries who were considered stupid and expendable enough to be entrusted with it. So, like I said, the Arntwerke D.13 is in fact, based on a very real plane called the Fokker K.1, which has the exact same problem, causing its Wikipedia page to be as short as its development cycle, and I love the fact that it ended with, the test program was brief. But anyway, in the last episode we talked about the Das Gegenbeispiel with a staggering -8 stability. This plane has -9. If you don't want to die in 5 seconds, I suggest getting a starting stat blocks with comm that isn't in the goddamn negative, but I'm not your parent so just do whatever you want. Besides its non-existent stability, it's also very slow, climb like a snail, and it's one of the few aircrafts that can give the pilot 3 stress for obvious reasons. However, it's also incredibly agile thanks to its high handling and wing warping, have fuel range like nothing else, and tough enough that you can actually crash the plane and survive. It also has 8 massive bombs to bring the pain on those below, and 2 turreted light machine guns that can shoot in just about any directions besides down and behind. To sum it up, it's a slow as hell fighter bomber that can turn on a dime to get back at incoming scout planes. Just try not to crash it. It's also quite cheap to purchase, you just need to convince people to get on it. Moving on to the variants, the first thing I suggest is immediately get rid of the wing warping and switch it for flap aileron. This immediately increases the stability from -9 to -5, for a higher survivability. You can also just completely ignore this reasonable suggestion and switch out the tiny Rona 80 horsepower engines for something much bigger for more speed, or even get bigger guns, because without the propeller in the way, your options for firepower is vastly increased. And for the last plane of this episode, the Rathenau 9C, a completely normal plane with rockets. Combat in the early years of the war showed the complete superiority of any aircraft that could fire directly forwards. Rathenau's first type, the 7, used a deflector plate, but this was obviously a stopgap, and Mike Kessler, Rathenau's chief designer, drew up a clean sheet aircraft in 1581. The result was the Rathenau 9, which was Macchi's primary combat aircraft, until Ritter Company showed up in 1587. As Ritter planes became more common, Rathenau planes soon found a new niche in balloon hunting squadrons, using rockets to down observers before they could be winched out of danger, and this thing is quite good at that role. Looking at its stat, the Rathenau 9C is nothing special for its price, which is very cheap. It's kinda slow, and fragile, but it's very agile with a rotary engine and can climb quite well. Its reliability, visibility, and stability are all just normal and quite okay, which is the word you can use to sum up this whole plane. It's okay, it doesn't actively try to kill you, at least by early pilot survivability standard, it's just an okay plane. It's armed with a single light machine gun, adequate firepower for a plane of its era and price, and it has 4 mass worth of rocket, enough to pop a balloon or some light ground targets. Honestly, the best part is that the plane is expendable. You fly it, crash it, buy a new one or used one as a replacement, and it doesn't try to kill you like the other Rathenau. As for its variants, there's the 9B, which has Rona Z11 engine, speed prop, and 3 micro-tanks instead of a full-sized fuel tank. Remember to get rid of the free frame section, and you get a machine with the same exact speed despite lower engine power but with lowered climb rate. Its stall speed is very low though. Next is 9D, which has Schreiber B9 engine for higher speed, boost, and climb rate for essentially no drawback besides being a bit more expensive. The 11A model also has the Schreiber B9 engine, but has a fixed hull machine gun instead of the LMG and optimized with money instead of sacrificing stronger support, making the plane tougher with better firepower but also slightly more expensive. Finally, there's the 11B, which is 11A but with the addition of wing-mounted LMG. This makes the plane a bit sluggish and even more expensive to fly, but it has more firepower and honestly still quite cheap. And that's all on the Believer's plane, from the suicidal Theler Zweihander, which is a plane with a sword with all that implied, the dangerous Mitcher IGJ-83 just like, which is to say the least, an absurd design as a result of an even more absurd conditions, the highly unstable Arntwerke D.13 that can carry bomb and people straight to the ground, and the normal Rathenau 9C that actually doesn't try to kill the pilot. If you are looking to buy these planes as characters of other classes, why? No, don't do that. Anyway, that's all for now, and I will see you all next time. Hello there, if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell button. If you really want to support my channel, you could visit my Patreon page, or buy me some coffee, links in the description. Anyway, have a nice day.